Candace Owens is an actress, as we've described yesterday in episode 1416. Candace Owens is an actress who's playing a role. She's playing Candace Owens, who's a real person. She is a real person, but sort of like Jerry Seinfeld, a improv comedian, stand-up comedian who played Seinfeld, and Seinfeld, sort of like how Larry David played in the series Curb Your Enthusiasm, a little bit more, I would just say real than Roseanne Barr playing Roseanne in Roseanne. What has happened is this whole art form of people playing versions of themselves, exaggerated versions of themselves in a not actual real world setting, although it looks it, on a show titled after themselves. And Candace Owens is playing Candace Owens in the Candace Owens show. She makes movies. She goes to events. She has what she has suggested to be a public profile, which is her real self, but it is the Candace Owens show version of Candace Owens. Candace Owens is playing a part. Obviously, in real life, she looks a lot like she does on camera, aside from the spectacular lighting and the makeup, which is common for all people. And I think the way our society is structured, unfortunately, women are under more pressure and I can't even get into all of the reasons to use optimal lighting. I mean, it's a judgmental culture, whatever. And her body language is probably similar in real life to her on camera, but again, it's a scripted version of her, and her thoughts can change from time to time based upon what the role requires or that she is filling, playing Candace Owens on the Candace Owens show. And probably the most sincere versions of Candace Owens that you'll find is before she was on a show, before she was being asked to play the role of Candace Owens, or before she decided to pursue and fill that role of Candace Owens. Now, there was a role for someone like her, and I think the desire was to have a female fill that particular role, although I think that what was needed to be accomplished maybe could have been filled by a man of the right type, but they needed to accomplish certain things. They needed to capture certain audiences, and I just don't think a man could have gained the type of sympathy from the people that they needed to gather sympathy from. And Candace Owens is, well, she's capable of doing this. She's capable of selling that. As we reviewed yesterday, and as we're going to review in this show here, Candace Owens initially got some public visibility, though not national by any stretch of the imagination, through a situation that happened in her high school. I don't know how scripted that was. It's possible. There's some parts about it which seem a little awkward and unlikely, but again, who am I to say, right? That's not really the point. And we're not really focusing on that too much. What we are focusing on, though, is that as she realized that she is capable of doing this improv-style acting and being herself at the same time, an art form which continued to be explored throughout the 1980s and 1990s and boomed afterwards. I mean, Seinfeld was showing the potential. Roseanne, the Roseanne show, which I've never mentioned before, but it's so obvious. It's called Roseanne. And the Roseanne Barr and the Roseanne show is important because it contained people who are going to come up in today's show, George Clooney. They're playing themselves, but as it was discovered, the potential of this and the potential to govern people with new forms of media and media distribution and control, the role of the podcast and the Substack, which are filled by actors who play versions of themselves. Candace Owens came along, and she was at the right age, the right demographic, the right capabilities, and she proved herself someone who could be trusted to stay on script and do what is needed more often than not. And that's important. If you're going to be in front of a live audience, which she isn't always, but if she ever were to be, imagine the sensitivity. It's sort of like someone who's in Congress or president. You can't break character in the middle of a congressional hearing. You have to stay in character. Even though it's scripted, it's so easy to forget a line or to let something through that you shouldn't. The national security is in your hands. The security of the United States of America is in the hands right now of, I'm not saying that they control it, but Joe Rogan, Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, these aren't everyday people anymore. They're not simply podcasters. I would venture to say that the investigator, at the very least, Anthony Pellicano, who I mentioned yesterday, I'm not going to read the report today on him, probably knows more and is trusted with more national security secrets than the current director of the FBI, Kash Patel. And I think that's a pretty safe thing to say. So we are encouraged to talk about three-letter agencies as if they have all this power and all this knowledge. And I'm sure there's a lot of people within them that do have lots of power and lots of knowledge. But there's not many people in the FBI that have a microphone every day who can, if they say the wrong thing, cause people to go into the streets within 24 hours. Nobody at the CIA or FBI, as far as I know, currently has that type of power. Maybe they have that arresting power, enforcement power, the ability to control arms, but they certainly don't have that type of access to microphones and public influence. Podcasters do. And you could say if the pen is mightier than the sword, the microphone is mightier than the pen. It's true. The microphone is mightier than the pen. It's direct. You could write something and then print it and have it distributed. The microphone, with simple movements of my vocal cords and the sound being captured through some wires and distributed on the internet, I can influence a lot of people. It's only through the willpower alone of those who watch my program, knowing how capable I am and how much I've already been able to figure out. Their willpower and their efforts to lock me down and to do things to me. You can only imagine what those things were, traps that I've avoided, that I'm still here. Thoughts, by the way, to Jonathan Cooey for yesterday. Was a tough day for him, memorializing the loss of his best friend. So as Candace Owens was pulled in, initially she was playing the role of someone who was in the podcast world or tech world, social media world, who was probably going to be left-leaning. Again, these are the ways that we've decided to carve things up, and I understand how overloaded these terms are and inaccurate. You just need to have some frame of reference here, okay? So I think that her success there was mixed. And, you know, what's interesting is there's many people, as I worked in a big tech company, okay, there's not many people who are politically left-leaning in the United States of America who listen to podcasts. There really aren't. They listen to, educational stuff, but they get a lot of their news from mainstream sources. Now, why is that? I think they mostly just listen to mainstream sources. I'm a pretty high-functioning person, and I barely listen to the news at all. And if I did, I would turn on CNN or the local news to realize what's going on. I couldn't imagine that they would be as inaccurate as they are. But when I was in the tech world and doing my job for 20-something years, that's what I would have listened to. It seemed crazy to get online and try to extract from Twitter, of all places, some semblance of what was going on. And I think many other people, they're just working so hard, they're so focused, and there's a certain level of trust that many of them have. It's not a negative ideology. It's just, there's just more, you keep going on. And I think that's how they operate. So the need to control that part of the world, it's not that they are less intellectual, less smart, less curious. It's just that their curiosities are already so wrapped up, usually in their jobs and other personal hobbies, that they don't need to be influenced much more than what the mainstream media already seems to offer. So the podcast world, with Candace Owens in that position, I don't think it really filled much of a need. There really wasn't a need for her to do that. But she must have showed some capability. And then you could tell, I think it was out in 2017, she was, repurposed. And the two people who her own profile called out to her Milo Yiannopoulos, Mike Cernovich, and these immediately should be recognizable as names which are in the Steve Bannon fake right world. In this world of right-leaning podcasts, it's not true that it's organic. It's just as much orchestrated. There's just as many talent agencies, and there's just as much money as you would find on the other side in Hollywood. It's just not as apparent. People think Hollywood movies and big-name actors like Matt Damon and big-name movie producers, and they can't imagine that the machinery of Hollywood and big movies has slowly, over not just the last few years, but 10 or 20 years, been getting ready and preparing for the potentiality and then eventuality of the movement towards podcasts, at least for a big chunk of America. I don't mean necessarily the majority, but a lot. Because right-leaning people, although many of them will just trust Fox, I don't know what it is, but they tend to search a little bit more. They're a little bit less trusting. In that, just that little bit less trusting aspect of them sometimes is enough to cause them to want to maybe get a second opinion on something. And usually that's satisfied by having, Newsmax or something like that, or InfoWars. But what happens is then you have some people who search for a little bit more and a little bit more. So all of this whole world of podcasting is associated with right-leaning, but it really should be more associated with people who are not necessarily better or smarter, but of a disposition which causes them to be a little bit more curious and a little bit more apt to do some of their own researching, some of their own hunting, searching for more sources which resonate them. And Candace Owens, I think, was seen as someone that could maybe satisfy thousands, hundreds of thousands, and now millions of people. And when you're talking about Milo Yiannopoulos, when you're talking about the Steve Bannon Network, you are now talking about billions of dollars behind the scenes. Not necessarily just from Steve Bannon, but aggregated. And as we've shown yesterday with this one article here from 2006 Time Magazine, Steve Bannon, Harvey Weinstein, and Kirk Kerkorian. We know Steve Bannon and Harvey Weinstein go back to the 90s, although their business deals didn't really start till 2004, 2005, the 9/11 movie, narrative control. But the deeper network analysis suggests that Steve Bannon was in this network before. Steve Bannon, in fact, was already making money through syndication of Seinfeld going back to the 90s. So he's already making money then, has already started to sniff out the potential success of this whole new world of podcasting. And with Kirk Kerkorian also in the mix, Kerkorian being the billionaire, big casino guy in Nevada. And Kerkorian used to own MGM Studios. So Kerkorian, of course, is connected with all the movie makers, and they all realize, I think, are being told where the future is going to be, working with different talent agencies. And in the middle of this, with Kirk Kerkorian, what's noteworthy is that he is Armenian, and he is willing to put a ton of his money into the cause of raising awareness of Armenian genocide. How the hell does that even connect in with Candace Owens? How the hell does that even connect in with Candace Owens? Well, first, I started with this photo here being presented. This is 2015. April 2015. This is Kanye doing an impromptu concert at Swan Lake, which is considered to be pure water. A concert in Armenia where Kanye West says that he said he almost suggested he's Jesus. And it's a bunch of people taking pictures of him, which is going to go on social media. Kanye West is a ally of Candace Owens, going back quite a ways. They're always in this trust circle. And the reason why Kanye West, one of the reasons anyways, is in Armenia at this time is because at that time he is with Kim Kardashian, who is Armenian. And Kim Kardashian, along with Cher, are in Armenia and are part of promoting this movie called The Promise, which is about raising awareness of the Armenian genocide probably the biggest Hollywood production of all time so far about the Armenian genocide. And its primary financial supporter is Kirk Kerkorian on the Nevada, again, who passed in 2016 or 17. Meaning, from the very beginning, really, the talent agencies, Steve Bannon, etc., have been right there raising awareness of Christians being killed in the Armenian genocide. And that is exactly where Candace Owens comes in. I know I'm not telling the story as crisply as I'd like to, but Candace Owens' entrance in is in this backsplash of genocide awareness. Now, Piers Morgan show.
Are supplying the arms to murder Christians, okay? In Armenia, the oldest Christian country in the world.
She's saying that Armenia, Christians now, are being killed by arms from Israel. Israel, and I guess Israel is now supporting the genocide against Christians in Armenia. And every time I go back to the beginning, it mutes it. For heaven's sakes, so annoying.
In Israel, it's wall-to-wall coverage. But when Christians die all over the world, nobody talks about it. Everyone wants to correlate everything to World War II. Everyone wants to talk about Adolf Hitler, and rightfully so, he was a horrific person. But nobody wants to talk about Henryk Yagoda, right? Nobody wants to talk about the Bolsheviks. Nobody wants to talk about the Christian Holocaust. I am tired of the media, exhausted of the media not speaking about what is happening to Christians all around the world. And it is especially horrific while at the exact same time that it is happening, the slaughter of Christians in Armenia, the arms being supplied by Israel, that the media turn.
First off, arms are not being provided by Israel. Israel is, in fact, via India, supporting Armenia. What an ignorant statement to make. Fighter jets, rockets are coming from India, going to Armenia for Armenia's defense against Pakistan and Azerbaijan. Is there Israeli technology, maybe some chip technology, which through some company is finding its way to Azerbaijan? Possibly. In this complex world, we have complex computer systems and complex part supplies and supply chains. It's possible the United States has some components in there, as well as Russia, and who knows, maybe even Finland. I don't know. But on a grand scale, Israel is not supplying arms to kill Christians in Armenia. That is the most ridiculous statement and inaccurate statement, well, among them. We see so many ridiculous statements that I can't even quantify it anymore. Now, she has become very anti-Israel over time. Okay, initially she probably was anti-Israel, but then you get on the Bannon network, then you become pro-Israel, and now she's mad about the Gaza genocide, and she's also mad about the Armenian genocide. India's position on the Gaza genocide is very interesting. They want it to stop, but at the same time, India has rapidly escalating economic and military trade connections with Israel. Why doesn't Candace Owens ever just say India? Is India the root of all evil? No. I don't think any country is the root of all evil or all good. That is also a very stupid, simple-minded thing to say. India has a ton of military and economic momentum going for it, and they also have a cultural trait where dishonesty for the benefit of which can result in business and economic success can be viewed favorably. That's just the truth. I know people of Indian ancestry in the United States who despise that. It's one of the reasons why they never want to go to India in their life. It is what it is, okay? Let's just acknowledge it. Nor is everyone in India of that particular trait either. But it is something that I think is reasonable to call out. But she'll never say India. It's just so absurd how militant this effort is to just never say India. And Steve Bannon, every once in a while, he'll say Modi's awesome, and then that's it. That's as far as he'll go. Or the U.S. should improve relations with India. But, people who say negative things about the visa thing or or say that the United States should avoid getting involved in the India-Pakistan war, such as Charlie Kirk, are given exit interviews and told you're going to be part of a fake assassination right now. So she is definitely aware of this. You can find her at the so with all of her big support, or one of her biggest supporters, Kanye West and the Kardashians and the Armenian genocide. There's the Armenian Genocide, the Promise movie, which was funded by Kerkorian's connections, or I should say at the very least consultation and other business connections, directly or indirect, the Steve Bannon and Harvey Weinstein, etc. How has any of this just never come up? What's I going to say here? There's a good Dennis Prager video where Dennis Prager is see, I can put this one. And I put it on the screen because Prager is the guy in PragerU that
there
gave
is something unique about anti-Semitism, about or
Candace
Jew hatred,
Owens,
whatever term you would
her
use.
break with the
And
Candace
it's very
Owens show.
important that
Candace
everyone
Owens show
understands
initially
this.
was with Prager University.
People dislike people.
And this is
nations dislike nations. Religions.
This is on the Peanut Butter and Jelly show. I'm sorry, the Peter Ben David show. The Armenian, who looks very Indian to me, but this Armenian here, Prager, right around the same time, is on the PBD show talking about the differences between the Israeli genocide, or I should say the Gaza genocide, or the genocide against Jews, and then there's the genocide against Armenia, and Candace is definitely aware of all of these little nuances. But I did get a book in. I can't believe I got this one for, I think it was $10. It could have been 15 plus shipping. It's a 2008 book called Preventing Genocide. Preventing Genocide by David Hamburg. David Hamburg, Preventing Genocide. The subtitle is Practical Steps Toward Early Detection and Effective Action. It's a 2008 book. David Hamburg is a name that, sadly, most Americans don't know. Most Americans, if you want to get in this world of online research and have meaningful discussions about meaningful people that have really impacted history, among the names that should be part of your vocabulary, Henry Kissinger, Joshua Lederberg, David Hamburg. David Hamburg handled America's nuclear disarmament with Russia. He was our lead negotiator with Yeltsin and Mikhail Gorbachev. David Hamburg was. Funny, nobody knows this. He has a PhD in molecular biology and psychology. David Hamburg was very good friends with Joshua Lederberg. He was the head of the Carnegie for, 11 or 12 years in the 1980s and 1990s. And then the Carnegie, after David Hamburg stepped down, was taken over by a American of Armenian ancestry, Vartan Gregorian, who participated in those events in Armenia. David Hamburg worked with Vartan Gregorian. He also worked a lot with, or at least as far as getting Armenian genocide awareness going, Nubar Afan, the Armenian who lived in the United States, who founded Moderna. Moderna was founded by one of the top supporters of recognition of Armenian genocide and the top supporters of current Armenia, and the next director of the Carnegie. Also, we talk a lot about the Defense Threat Reduction Agency here, the DTRA, and the Noon Lugar program. That's a program that started, again, because of Senators Sam Nunn and Richard Lugar, who were foundational in United States nuclear weapon deterrence and repurposing of what was said to be highly enriched uranium from the nuclear arsenal of Russia and Ukraine and so on. And Noon and Lugar, the Noon Lugar program, was started really via negotiations that David Hamburg, Mr. Preventing Genocide, had. The Defense Threat Reduction Agency, many credit it with being the realization into an agency of the Noon Lugar program, but the founding father of the Defense Threat Reduction Agency is David Hamburg. Now, with one cool side note, by the way, and you can see a picture of David Hamburg here on the liner notes. He passed away in 2019, I think, 2018 or 2019. Lived into his 90s. This is actually a signed copy. Can I see that there? Yep. I actually got a signed copy. David Hamburg himself signed it. David Hamburg's daughter, Margaret Hamburg, wound up running the FDA for 7 out of the 8 years, almost the entire time that President Obama was president. President Obama, by the way, his priority as far as international relations go was bringing the United States very close with India. The man who worked as the deputy within the State Department and ambassador to India during that time was Richard Verma, another name that no one will ever mention. And Richard Verma was the security advisor of Nevada Senator Harry Reid, probably per the request of the Armenian community, including someone like Kerkorian, because the top assassin killing people, revenge killings in the 19-teens and 1920s for the Armenian genocide was the grandfather of Richard Verma's wife. That's how wrapped up in Armenian genocide so many of these characters are. It's just so odd that this topic of genocide is so wrapped up in all of these discussions with so much disagreement about what it means. Why isn't just killing people bad? Killing people is bad. Unless it's self-defense, it's considered to be a sin. Why this whole special category about genocide? It's a reasonable question. Now, I have some Native American ancestry. Maybe I should be talking about genocide all the time. Reality is if you actually do some estimates on how many people used to live in North America of Native American ancestry, and even that was mixed before Columbus landed, and then you factor in the percentage of the current U.S. population that has some Native American ancestry by percentage, you actually wind up with an interesting number, which is if there were no people who ever came to North America, you would have really, I think, still like 50, 70% of that total population is still here, blood and ancestry-wise. It's a fascinating concept. So was it really a genocide? If blood-wise, anyways, DNA-wise, matrilineal DNA-wise, they're all kind of still here in a weird way. It's a interesting thought experiment. I don't know. I just did a video short, and I guess this is really just turning into more of a little bit of an update video here. There were a couple of other ones that I had. Yeah, so Candace Owens shares her. She talks when Kanye says he's afraid to die. Candace Owens shares those tweets. Here's one where the LA Times owner, of all things, Los Angeles Times owner, nope, wrong picture there, Patrick Soon-Shiong, he wants to give Candace Owens money. So he wants to bring on Candace Owens and who else? Cheryl Hines to start a conservative news source. How ridiculous is that? Now, I'm mad at Candace Owens. I have to admit that I am. But I understand that what she does as an actress. She's playing a role. Some parts about her life are reflected in the role that she plays, and some aren't. It is illogical to believe that all 4 children with this other man in England are her children. That's just an illogical thing to believe. One of them might be. All 4? For real? I don't know. It's possible, but why would you assume that? Just because you see 4 boxes of cereal on the shelf of the Seinfeld show, that doesn't mean that Jerry Seinfeld likes to eat those 4 types of cereal. Why do we assume that podcasting is any different? It's not any different. I made a decision to call my show Houstonic.live. It's named after a river. It is a nod to some of my Native American roots, which are obviously, you can just look at me. I don't look like chief research and archive. My name is Mark Kulak. I have a Polish last name that's from my stepdad. I was born Mark Nichols, Nichols. I see myself as really as an American. As an American, I'm not necessarily a better person for it. That's where I was born. I could have been born anywhere into anything. I try to be true to what I was born as and the vision that the founding fathers had for the United States of America. I would like to see that vision, continue to be upheld and protected, and if there's ever necessary, evolve. But my name is Mark Kulak, and this is Houstonic.live, and I had a vision of making a show, or the Houstonic.live show, which was made inspired by my own research, my own archival, my own analysis, and my own desire to have a show which would constantly remind people of the scale of the fatal drug overdose epidemic in the United States of America. My show is a creation from nothing. There was no Houstonic.live. There was merely a river called a Housatonic, or there's even disagreement about what the original name of it was, and it was mispronounced and misspelled several times over 300 years, and we wound up with the Housatonic. I always just loved the word, and hence I chose the name for the show and my business, my little research firm, whatever you want to call it. But I did not call it the Mark Kulak Show because I don't want to create another Mark Kulak. This is me. I'm just an American. I have some skills, strong in some areas, bad in some areas. There's some things where I'm crushing it at. And there's some areas which I can barely keep up doing this particular program. I don't want to get on the air and pretend to be something that I'm not. If that has become more and more important to me over time. I don't want to give away too many of the specifics just to protect, some of the anonymity or whatever little bit of it there is, and the personal lives of some of the people around me and close to me. But this is what you get. If you were to meet me in person, you'd immediately recognize me. You'd know my mannerisms for the most part, and you wouldn't be surprised by much of anything. I'm not playing an abstraction of myself. I merely try to sit upright, so, I get rid of the double chin and everything when I'm sitting in a chair. And I have a big blast of caffeine usually before a show, so I have a little bit of extra pep, whatever is necessary. But that's about it. I talk a lot more during a show than I typically do the rest of the day. And but other than that, this is me. All right, I'm not making a show about some person like Jerry Seinfeld or Roseanne or Larry David or Candace Owens or Tucker Carlson. I'm supposed to believe that Tucker Carlson is a white bread guy who just likes to enjoy sitting in a room full of Cracker Barrel, collectibles and talking to people under low light and then who goes fly fishing in Central Park. Come on. Just be real, okay? Just be real. That's why I did not call this the Mark Kulak Show. I think Jonathan J. Cooey, PhD, could go in biological. He didn't call it the Jonathan J. Cooey Show. It's the Giga Ohm Show. The show is the creation. He's a real person. The Candace Owens Show it's actually the Candace Owens Show. It is because the show, which is created, is Candace Owens. Can't you see it? Now, if Candace Owens was a journalist, okay, who created a show called, a young American woman who is of mixed race, who recently discovered the benefits of conservatism show with Candace Owens. That would be a show where it would be clear that the show is what's being created and she's the real person, or at the very least she is just a vehicle. But no, she is the show. Look at all of the other, the Ian Carrolls, the Whitney Webbs. They are the show. And as a show, they are the creation. They're a little bit like that in real life, obviously visually, but aside from that, they are versions of themselves. They've been hired like Seinfeld, like Roseanne Barr, like Bill Maher show. Isn't it obvious? The Jimmy Kimmel show, the Adam Carolla show. Why not Adam Carolla just doing a show called, something else? It's because Adam Carolla himself has become the show, the Joe Rogan show. I will never make a Mark Kulak show. And if I ever did make a Mark Kulak show, it would be appropriate for you to think that Mark Kulak is not really who I am right now. That would be me playing a version of myself, probably doing illogical things. Jonathan Cooey, our friend, says, if you believe in X and you do Y. I cannot think of a better phrase. That there should be bumper stickers and T-shirts about that, of understanding, of assessing people who are in shows like this. If someone believes that more Americans need to be aware of the number of fatal drug overdoses, especially if their own child, or in my case, stepson, who was it's not like I just knew him for 2 years. He died when he was 27. I met him when he was 3. He was a third of my life, basically. I don't know how much further I'll live past, 75. 1 out of every 3 days of my life. The most important years of my life as an adult were him growing up and all the joys and a lot of the challenges, as someone who was also, he had some special needs that went with that. That was a huge part of my life. If I went through that, and if I believe that awareness is a thing, then what should I do? Then I should put money towards campaigns to raise awareness. I should have a podcast that regularly, maybe a few people can find, that that I should go to events to raise awareness, that I should constantly, interject the impact of the opioid epidemic and drug overdoses and addiction into discussions. And that's exactly what I do. I was part of an effort that resulted in OA, first of its type in the United States of America, overdose awareness license plates here in the state of Massachusetts. I've had dozens of conversations. I'd like to say hundreds, but at least dozens, several dozen, with people just at gas stations or in parking lots who they see the license plate, and we start up a conversation. They may mention a friend, a child, a relative, a neighbor who's dealing with addiction. I believe X, and I've done Y. And in the real world, if someone has X or believes X, they should do Y. In a sitcom, I forget exactly what the script was, but there was a sitcom, such as in the Seinfeld show, where Elaine, the neighbor of Jerry Seinfeld, is she's at a restaurant, or at some event, and she comes to the realization, or someone gives her the idea that the muffin top, the top of a muffin, is usually the best part. I think a lot of people love the top of the muffin. It's extra, usually a little extra salt, a little extra sweet. It's crunchy. Here I am. I'm going keto this month, so I'm thinking about muffins a lot. And in the real life, you go, wow, muffin tops are great. In a sitcom, but that's it, right? Maybe every once in a while you sneak an extra muffin. Maybe every once in a while you don't want to admit it, but you eat the muffin top and you don't eat the rest. But that's it. In a sitcom, okay, you do something comedic, especially if the role or the job of the sitcom is to make people laugh. And something comedic is what Elaine or whoever else in the show does in the Seinfeld, is they quit their job and they invest their money in a food service called Top of the Muffin to you. That's what happens in a sitcom. That's an illogical thing to do. If you like muffin tops, to just suddenly quit your life, sell everything, and start a store. It's funny. And maybe every once in a while someone says, what the heck, and in the real world they'll do something like that. But it is, in the real world, silly to think that muffin tops are so good. But in a comedy, you can explore something like that. The goal is to make people laugh. Okay? Movies, sitcoms, etc., people do funny things. They act irrationally. Okay? In the real world, people wouldn't do that. So Candace Owens is playing a version of herself, but it's the Candace Owens show. If Candace Owens really believed, and I mean really believed, that we need to fight for the children because so many children are victims of rape cults or whatever, or sex abuse. If she really believed that, then she would do some reading, and she would become aware that the leading cause of child prostitution is not Islam, and it's not Jews, and it's not Satanism, and it's not Venetians, and it's not Satanism, whatever. It's drug addiction. And after that realization, she would regularly highlight the massive problems the U.S. has with addiction. But she doesn't do that on her show because it's the Candace Owens show. She'll say that, and then as illogical as it would be in the real world to sell everything and start the Top of the Muffin to your restaurant, she'll then go on and say, this is why Trump is bad because he has friends who are Jews and Israel, and we need to stop giving money to Israel because kids are hurting somewhere. It's an illogical series of thoughts, but it's appropriate for the Candace Owens show. In the Candace Owens show, it's an illogical X, then you do Y, because it's not reality. In the Brett Weinstein show, if you believe X, you do Y. When Kevin McKernan is on a show, there's no Kevin McKernan show, but if he really believed DNA contamination was the problem, then in the very beginning, if in the real world, okay, if he really believed that in the real world, he would have done everything possible to make people aware of the actual underlying risk profile first. He would have told people about the reality of manufacturing and how about it's impossible, and he would expose that most of the vaccines were placebos. That's what he would do in the real world. But he plays the Kevin McKernan on a Kevin McKernan type show as a guest on other shows. And instead, you have pretend emails and phone calls with other pretend officials. It's an illogical set of responses. You know why Paul Offit and Mary Manly Hands Hollins never get anywhere, and the rest of Children's Health Defense on their shows is because what they're saying in their shows is not what they're actually saying in real life, or probably believe in real life. Because what they're doing in their shows, their stunning, retarded lack of progress shows, it would not make any sense in real life. But on their shows, they have what they do in the show or what they don't during show, which is actually kind of consistent. The role of, if you have a show, the Polly Tomy show or whatever the heck it is, okay, you don't act, you're already playing an abstracted version of yourself. You're not playing a real person in the real world. In fact, the job of your show is to have another show. If you immediately do in the real world things to address that, well, that's actually going to result in the termination of your show, because your show is about a person who is perpetually perplexed about why children get harmed with injections. It would almost be suicidal to solve the problem. Why should anyone with a show? Now, if someone had a show about, making progress, well, even then, I don't know. Anyways, I don't know. Maybe that was a bit of an incoherent ramble. But I'm feeling a lot of synergy right now with a few people. And anyways, Candace Owens is probably going to go along, and she's still talking about her French missiles and DuPont. Just letting you know, DuPont is a $12 billion a year revenue company. Google is half a billion, half a trillion almost. Google makes 30 to 50 times more revenue a year than DuPont. To think that the world is going to be subverted by DuPont's desire to sell an extra few $100 million or $1 billion more in missiles is one of the most absurd things anyone has ever said or thought. But maybe we should focus on the DuPont instead of Google, because Google is run by an Indian CEO. That would probably make sense. Let's keep the heat on everything and anything but India, because that's where the money comes from. Or the UN money, whatever you want to call it. Maybe our Indian National Security Advisor, what's her name? Tulsi Gabbard will look into it. Or maybe not. Remember, Tulsi Gabbard was the vice chairman of the Democratic National Committee before they needed to repurpose her. Playing a role. That's my show for today. Thank you. Take care. God bless.